So you own an oil refinery. Crude oil is pouring in through one end of your plant, and gasoline and diesel are flowing out the other. Oil prices are climbing all year, which means you're getting rich. Except you might not be. When you own a refinery, you don't actually make money on oil. You never did. The price of crude could double, and you might earn less. It could crash, and you might earn more. Your entire fortune rides on a single number that has a strange name and behaves like nothing else you've ever bet on. It's called the crack spread. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand it better than plenty of people who work in energy. You'll also learn why nobody will build one of these plants in America anymore, and why owning one means voluntarily setting fire to a fortune on a schedule. And there's a third cost. The one nobody mentions until the deal is signed. We'll get to that. Let's start with the simple version. Forget oil prices for a second. Think about a sandwich shop. You buy bread, you buy meat, you buy cheese. That's your input. You sell finished sandwiches. That's your output. Do you care about the price of bread? Only a little. What you really care about is the gap between what the ingredients cost you and what the sandwich sells for. That gap is your margin. If bread doubles, but sandwich prices double too, you're fine. If bread stays cheap, but nobody will pay for sandwiches, you're dead. A refinery works exactly the same way. Your bread is crude oil, your sandwich is gasoline and diesel, and the gap between them has a name. The crack spread. It's called that because inside the refinery, giant machines literally crack heavy crude oil molecules apart into lighter, more valuable ones. Gasoline for your car, diesel for trucks, jet fuel for planes. Now the industry has a standard way of measuring this, and it's beautifully simple once you see it. They call it the 3-2-1 crack spread. You take 3 barrels of crude oil going in. On average, that turns into roughly 2 barrels of gasoline and 1 barrel of diesel coming out. 3 in, 2 and 1 out. You add up what those 2 barrels of gasoline and 1 barrel of diesel sell for. You subtract what the 3 barrels of crude cost you, and whatever's left is your margin per barrel. That's it. That's the whole business on a napkin. You're not betting on oil going up. You're betting on that spread staying wide. And here's why this matters right now. In 2026, that spread has been doing something wild. It recently spiked to some of the highest levels ever recorded. In some weeks, it approached $70 a barrel, when the normal, boring long-run average sits closer to 10 or 15. Refinery stocks like Valero and Marathon shot up, and the reason wasn't that oil got expensive, it was that gasoline and diesel got expensive faster than crude did. The gap blew wide open. Refinery owners were printing money, not because of oil, but because of the spread. So now you get the basic idea. But here's where it gets interesting and where the simple version falls apart. You'd think, okay, this is a risk I can manage. I'm a smart operator. There's a whole futures market out there. I can lock in my crude price so I'm protected. I can lock in my gasoline price so I'm protected. Hedged on both sides. Safe. Except you're not. And this is the part that keeps refinery executives up at night. You can hedge the price of crude. You can hedge the price of gasoline. But the spread between them is its own living, breathing thing, and it moves on its own. Think about what actually drives it. A refinery fire in Texas suddenly makes gasoline scarce, and the gap explodes overnight. A recession kills demand for diesel while crude stays high, and the gap collapses. Russia bans diesel exports, Ukrainian drones hit refineries overseas, tension flares around the Strait of Hormuz, and suddenly the distillate side of your spread goes vertical for reasons happening on the other side of the planet. Your entire profit lives inside that one moving number. And you can't cleanly lock it in because it's not a price. It's the relationship between two prices. And that relationship is driven by wars, weather, breakdowns, and demand shocks that no contract can fully insure against. Now, a fair objection. Traders will tell you there are crack spread futures. You can buy a contract on the spread itself. And that's true. But think about what you're actually running. A refinery is a physical machine that lives for decades and processes hundreds of thousands of barrels every single day. A paper hedge might smooth out a few months. It cannot lock in your real operating margin across the 30-year life of a plant. And every dollar you spend protecting your downside is a dollar shaved off your upside when the spread runs hot. So you can nibble at the edges of this risk. You can never make it go away. You are running one of the most capital-intensive businesses on earth, and the thing you make all your money on is the thing you can least control. And it cuts both ways. In 2020, when the pandemic hit and nobody was driving, the crack spread didn't just shrink, it went negative. Read that again. Refineries were losing money on every single barrel they processed. The finished fuel was worth less than the crude they made it from. You had multi-billion-dollar plants that would have been better off shutting the doors than running. That's the bet you make when you own a refinery. Uncapped upside, real downside, and no clean way to hedge the middle. So if the upside can be this good, you'd expect a gold rush. You'd expect companies racing to build shiny new refineries all over America. And here's one of the most surprising facts in this entire business: they don't. They basically stopped 50 years ago. The last major refinery built from scratch in the United States was Marathon's plant in Garyville, Louisiana. It came online in 1977. Since then, American fuel demand has grown massively. Oil production has boomed, and the country still hasn't built another one on that scale. Companies just kept bolting more capacity onto the plants they already had. Garyville itself got a nearly $4 billion expansion and now runs over 600,000 barrels a day. But no new ones. And now, the obvious question. Why? Is it money? Are these too expensive to build? No. That's the twist. The money is available. The industry throws billions at expanding existing sites. The thing that actually kills new refineries isn't the price tag. It's the permitting, the lawsuits, and the liability. Think about it from a builder's point of view. To build a brand new refinery, you need environmental permits from state and federal agencies, and that process can drag on for years. Then, the moment you get a permit, you get sued. Neighbors, environmental groups, local governments. One project up in North Dakota, near Theodore Roosevelt National Park, started its permitting all the way back in 2013 and took roughly a decade of grinding through reviews and litigation. One industry veteran described the people who keep killing these projects as the serial killers of the refinery industry. Proposal after proposal has died, not from lack of cash, but from a war of attrition. You spend years and hundreds of millions before you've refined a single drop with no guarantee you ever will. So the rational move, if you're a refiner, is simple. Never build new. Just expand what you already own, where the permits already exist and the fight is already over. Now let's say you do own one of these plants. You're through the gauntlet. The money is flowing. Time for a different brutal reality that the outside world never sees. Every few years, you have to shut the whole thing down on purpose. And it costs a fortune. It's called a turnaround. Every 3 to 5 years, a refinery takes major units or the entire plant completely offline. Not because something broke, you shut down a perfectly good money-printing machine on purpose. Because you're legally and physically required to open everything up, inspect it, and rebuild it before it fails on its own. Imagine your plant's population jumping from 300 workers to over 2,000 overnight. An army of specialized contractors swarming in for weeks. And here's the number. A major turnaround can cost $50 to $200 million, sometimes more. The American Petroleum Institute pegs big turnarounds at up to $200 million per event. That's the plant's entire annual maintenance budget compressed into a few brutal weeks. But that direct cost isn't even the whole wound. Remember, while the plant is offline, it's producing nothing, and a large refinery earns millions of dollars a day when it's running. So every single day of that shutdown, you're bleeding lost production on top of the repair bill. And turnarounds famously run over. Crews open up the equipment, find problems nobody could see from the outside, and suddenly your 2-week job is a 5-week job, each extra day costing you another 7 figures. You plan to spend $100 million. You spent $150. That's just Tuesday in this business. If you're finding this useful, take a second and subscribe. This channel breaks down how money and industry actually work, the parts nobody explains properly. Now here's the last piece, and it's the one that truly changes how you should think about ever owning something like this. Everything so far has been about running the plant. But remember that third cost I promised you, the one nobody mentions until the deal is signed. Here it is. There's a liability that has nothing to do with operations, and it doesn't care whether you're making money or losing it. It attaches to the land itself. When you buy a refinery, you're not just buying steel towers and pipes, you're buying the ground underneath them. And that ground has in many cases been soaking up petroleum, solvents, and heavy contamination for decades, sometimes for a century. Under America's federal environmental cleanup laws, responsibility for that contamination follows the property. It can reach current owners, and in many cases it reaches back to past owners too. Buy the deed, and you can inherit the sins buried in that soil long before you ever showed up. This is why these deals are so much heavier than they look. You are not signing up for a factory. You are signing up for the entire environmental history of a piece of land and a cleanup bill that can run into the hundreds of millions with no expiration date. And that liability is one more quiet reason nobody builds new ones. Why create fresh contaminated ground and a 50-year liability tail when you can buy or expand a site whose history is already someone else's problem? So step back and look at what owning an oil refinery actually is. You think you're in the oil business. You're making a leveraged, unhedgeable bet on a spread you don't control. Your upside can be historic, like it was in 2026, or it can go negative and torch you on every barrel, like it did in 2020. Nobody will let you build a new one, so the plants that exist are a closed, protected club. Every few years you have to voluntarily set $200 million on fire just to keep the thing alive. And underneath all of it, the land itself carries a liability that follows the deed and never really lets go. That's the real economics of the refinery. Not oil. Never oil. The gap, the shutdown, and the ground beneath your feet. Now that you understand the crack spread, you'll never look at gas prices the same way again. Because now you know the truth. The pump price isn't really about the price of oil. It's about that gap, and the people who understand the gap are the ones quietly making the money.